Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark. And like you, I'm a professional speaker, and I love listening to Speakernomics. Speakernomics is the professional speaker show that will help you thrive and grow a speaking business so you too can change the world one keynote session workshop and speech at a time. And on this episode, we welcome Mike Ganino. Mike works with professional speakers, keynote speakers, and executives to help them create transformative speaking experiences worthy of standing ovations. He's also known as a Keynote Director. Mike, welcome to Speakernomics. How are you today?
You know, I'm on this side of the tombstone, so I'm doing well. I think anytime we could say that, then it's not as bad as it could be.
Agreed. Now, to all my speaking friends, what are you doing to transform your relationship with your voice, body, and story for the audience? It's one thing to write about it in a keynote, and it's another thing to take a breath and speak the words out loud. But are you looking at your performances on stage from the audience's perspective or your own? Are you getting direct and honest feedback to make this unforgettable? It's time to not just impress the audience, but transform the way they think. And before we jump in, make sure to go to speakernomics.com. That's where you can find the tips, insights, and knowledge to help you become a better speaker, build a better business, and get paid to speak. All right, Mike, let's dive in. First of all, talk a little bit about the difference between public speaking coaches and keynote directors.
This whole idea came from a couple of my clients, Neen James, Aaron King. They were introducing me to other people at Actually Influence, and they were introducing people, and they kept saying, oh, Mike is kind of works with me like a director works with a performer. And so I just tuned into that. They kept calling me their keynote director, and I thought, well, if they're saying it, then I should probably use it. And initially, the title keynote director was just a fun thing to do. And as I started thinking about it more and saying, well, is there a distinction to be made between a public speaking coach? You know, you Google public speaking coach and you find one on the internet and you say, okay, I like that one, versus what I'm looking at as a keynote director. Is there actually a difference there? And I came up with several ways that I think that keynote directing is different than public speaking coaching. The core thing is that a lot of times for public speaking coaching, what they're focused on is helping the speaker get more comfortable. They're helping the speaker feel better on stage, feel less anxious, feel prepared, helping them with, you know, what should your slides be and what does a good speaker do? What do you do with your hands? How do you, change your voice? And from my perspective, that's helpful, sure. But at the level of people I work with professional speakers, with paid speakers, with best-selling authors, with the Fortune 50 people that I work with, that's not the issue. They're not coming and saying like, I'm a little nervous. How do I get rid of stage fright? Or how do I do this? What they're saying is, how do I get to the upper echelon? And in that case, I have to think like a director would working with Viola Davis or Jennifer Lawrence. I have to look at the performer and say, not how do I change them into what a good actor is or a good speaker is, but how do I take Viola Davis or Jennifer Lawrence, Aaron King, Neen James, Brandon Farbstein, all these people I've worked with, how do I take them and bring out what is most dynamic about them? How do I take them and expand the choices that they have available to them? And so my job isn't to give them tactics and best practices. It's to say at a very specific level, when you're at your best, what is that? And what more is possible? And what can we do together to help you get there? And so as a keynote director, my entire focus is on the audience, and not in the kind of like a, hey, put your audience, serve your audience way, which is lovely. And that's table stakes, but literally from a sitting in the seat, like a director has to think about the audience in a movie theater, sitting in the seat, watching. What am I seeing? How is it moving? Is it keeping my heart going? Is it changing my breathing? Is my pulse changing in response to what I'm seeing? Are the slides and the person and the message and the movement all cogent and cohesive and telling a powerful story? And I just think that's really different than a lot of public speaking coaching.
So give me a tactical example of, I've seen a lot of those great names. I remember seeing Brandon Farbstein give a tremendous keynote a couple of years ago at Influence. I saw Aaron King do one 2 or 3 years ago. She was fantastic. I've seen, I think, almost all of those folks, but give me a tactical example of what you're tweaking a little bit.
Yeah. And actually, both of those two influence talks are talks. I work with Aaron King for many, many years, all the time. Brandon, I specifically worked with him for that talk. So I've worked with both of them on those talks. So the night before, when Aaron King was going to give the one of the main stage talks at Influence in Vegas. It was the first year we were back at Caesars, and she was going to give the talk there. The night before, we're in her room, we're working on things, putting some finishing touches, and she had this moment where she was talking about like during COVID, because it was so fresh back then in everyone's mind, not that it isn't now, but it was, our first event back. That was like the year where they like limited food options at Caesar's Palace, the whole thing where it was like, try to find food, good luck, but we're open. And so we're in the room, and there was a bit in there that she had talked about laying in bed, like it was a joke. She was trying to find humor there. Laying in bed with a big bag of popcorn, like a big bag of like Costco popcorn. And I thought, well, if we're trying to get the audience to see the ridiculousness of it, right, then we need to heighten this. And it needs to be something more specific than popcorn, because popcorn could be like, well, is it like smart pop? Like that's not that bad for you. Or is it caramel coated? And then I thought, well, all of those are interesting. And I thought, could it be, and these are the kinds of cheats I think are okay to take in a story, could it be Cheetos? That feels dirty. Like laying in bed with a bag of Cheetos. And then it was like, oh yeah, laying in bed with a bag of Cheetos with the cheese film on your fingers, chewing it. You know how you like bite it off, that like cheese gets on there. So it's like, okay, that's interesting. And I thought, well, can we heighten it even more? Can we do a physical action of like, and I was laying in bed with this bag of Cheetos, but not like any bag of Cheetos, but like the Costco size bag of Cheetos, just plummeling it into my face, eating. And so we took that small little moment of like, oh, I was in bed with popcorn, to this huge bag of Cheetos that I'm reaching into and grabbing. So like those kinds of little moments are things that I'm watching for to say, how can we heighten this? How can we give the audience that like, oh my gosh, that was me. Maybe it wasn't Cheetos. Maybe it was ice cream sandwiches. Maybe it was whatever you're into. But that moment of like, oh yeah, when we were all depressed thinking, I've been laughing at my own jokes on screen all day long. I have been figuring out, hey, how much do you want for a virtual keynote? $4 and a cookie, I'll be there. Like when we were all sorting it out, that mess we were in, how could we bring it to life in a powerful way? We've got this stage. Aaron is a brilliant, like that same line I wouldn't do with some of my other people because it's not in their wheelhouse. They have other skills. Aaron is very physical. Aaron is physical with their face. She's like working with Lucille Ball or Carol Burnett. She could do a lot with her body, with her face. She could contort. So I knew she could take it there. If I was working with someone else, I wouldn't have them do that. I might have them find these still moments of connection where they're looking with someone. I think a lot of public speaking coaches would push someone to say, what's great is to be funny here. I just worked with someone else had written, another speaker had written their speech for them, and they came to me to work on it. And I was like, it doesn't work. These jokes work for that person. They don't work for you. These jokes feel older than you. They feel not honest when you're delivering them. Like words in there of saying things like baloney. This person would never say that word, but the person who wrote it would. And so what we're looking for with keynote directing is the very specific thing you could do. Aaron could pull off the Cheetos in the bag. Another person couldn't, but they could do something different. Those are the kind of moments I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'm going to offer her a bag of Cheetos next time I see her at an event, but definitely not Doritos.
She's so healthy, though. She's living over here in Laguna Beach, hiking every day. She puts us all to shame. So
yeah,
I don't even know
where she lives.
I know, me too. She's just down the road, but it's far enough down the road that she's got the better view.
Well, talk about then specifically something we had spoken about earlier, how we can strip away a lot of the things that we've learned inherently, all the bad habits that we develop even as speakers over time.
Yeah, there's this risk, I think, and this is what we were talking about, of feeling like what I'm saying is you should become like an actor, that you should perform. And yes and no. When I was studying acting, when I did improv, when I was doing theater, when I was doing commercials, deep acting work is often about revealing your truth and figuring out who are you and what matters to you and that kind of thing. But that takes a long time to get to. In the middle or in the beginning, what happens if you get that message of put on a performance, learn some acting skills to be a better speaker, is it can be more stuff that you're putting on. and it starts to feel less honest to you and to the audience. They can sniff it, they can smell it of like, oh, you're thinking about gesticulating in this way because you were told this is the way to do it. And then it becomes really performative and not honest. But the reality is, as children, we're talking about your son, my daughter, who's 3, they are genius storytellers. You can't take your eyes off them. Sometimes because they're, leaping off the top of the bookshelf, so you literally can't take your eyes off them. But there's something dynamic about them. The way they move is so honest. The way that they use their voice, and they scream and they stretch and they cry and they get quiet and they get soft and they make voices. When did we lose that? Why did we lose that? And how do we get back to that? Because you don't have to become a performer. You don't have to become an actor. You don't have to learn those skills. What we need to do is say, what are the social, cultural, familial, educational trauma histories that have started since you were a little baby and you were told you're too much. Good boys don't do that. Good girls don't do that. A ton of boys in the US at least learn not to be emotive in a certain way. Girls learn not to do this. So we start to constrict. We start to constrict our voice. We start to constrict our movement. We start to think like, well, my stories don't matter. I just need to tell them the facts and that'll be a good talk. What we need to do is go back in and say, how did I learn to become the person I am in front of other people? And how can I learn to make new choices? Because what I see so often for speakers is not that they make bad choices on stage. It's they're not even aware they could make different choices.
So not everybody's going to perform the same way.
Yeah.
And there are obviously all kinds of keynotes that run the gamut. But one of the things I think that we all can learn more of is to show our energy. And I think when you're thinking about some people who maybe they aren't as performative and demonstrative as you are, how do you get them to come out of their shell and yet still deliver a killer keynote with great content? Because I think sometimes you find people focus too much on the performance and not enough on the content, or vice versa. And I think, at least to me, often it's the opposite. They don't focus at all on the performative. They focus only on the content. And, it's somewhere in between. There's a sweet spot in between, but it's a blend of making certain that they give a great performance while still giving informative and great content that moves people.
Yeah. And I think, thank goodness that not everyone is one style. Thank goodness there's contrast. Because imagine an event where you're just getting pummeled by someone with my energy or someone with Aaron King's energy, and there's no soft spot. Or imagine a full hour where someone, me or Aaron or Laura Gassner-Otting, who I've worked with, who's got this conviction. Imagine that full hour, that person never takes us on a journey and is just pushing the whole time, is just this high energy the whole time. We need that contrast. I always say great speeches are about clarity and contrast. And then there's a bunch of little things inside of that. But if you're listening or watching this and you're thinking, well, I'm more chill. I am a more chill person. I stay here. Exactly. Perfect. But you still have a range. Your voice can do things. You can still speed up your pacing. You don't have to get louder. You can get faster. But even within getting louder, you can get louder. It doesn't mean you get as loud as me or you get as loud as, Tim Gard or something like that with his big personality, because that is who that person is. Off stage, that's who that person is. Like when the cameras aren't on, what we want you to be is that version of you, but theatrical. Audiences want spontaneity. They want it to feel like, oh, it's in the moment. You're here with me and it's real. But they also want it to feel theatrical. You're on a stage. You're in front of a boardroom. You're teaching a workshop. Like, it is about putting on a show to an element. So what is that for you? And I think that's one of the things with keynote directing that I'm really looking at that maybe a lot of public speaking coaching that I've seen hasn't done, is to say, what's possible for you? Like, what could you do? So if you are, like, even if you take Aaron King and Brandon, if you go back at Brandon Farbstein, if you go back and watch their 2 main stage talks from Influence, very different styles. very different messages. But the job is to heighten within their categories, heighten what they can do. What kind of humor could Brandon do? What kind of humor could Aaron do? What kind of slow moments could Aaron give us? What kind of slow moments could Brandon give us? Every single one of us has those choices available within our own range. And I think the sad thing I see so often is people have just never had the chance or the partner to experience that full range for themselves so they could say, I'm not stuck just playing the one note on the piano. I actually have more keys I can use. What would that look like for me? I think that's, regardless of your level of performance, we are on stage in front of people. They are watching us. We are communicating. So what's available to you is the question I think that we should be asking.
Are you ever happy with a performance, like truly happy? And I ask this because I've known a lot of great speaking coaches that I've worked with over time, and very rarely are they ever happy with someone's performance. And I guess it's because we always know there's something more to achieve. There's a tweak. There's a thing they could have done differently. But at some point, you got to get out of your head as a speaker and just do your best to deliver a great performance.
Yeah, I think that is where I do maybe think so differently, because I look at it and I think, ooh, look at the choices you made with what was available. Killer job. And so again, when I'm sitting there from the audience's perspective, I'm not looking at it from a public speaking coach and saying, what was the right thing to do? How many ums did you say? Did you move to the right place? Did your hands do the right thing? I'm looking at it from the audience's perspective and saying, did you give them an experience? And if you did your job. Are there things you could have done? Maybe. I don't know. Because in that moment, maybe there wasn't more available to you. Maybe you couldn't make a different choice in that moment, and that was what you could do. And so what I'm looking at is saying, well, our job was to give the audience a transformational experience. Did we do that? Do we help some people think differently? Do we help them see out a different window? I say sometimes our job is to help reframe things for people, especially in a keynote versus like a training of the audience. You're not there to like convince them they want something they don't want. They want what they want. Your job is to tell them you're looking out that window and that's why you're struggling. It's actually over here. What if we look out this window? So did you do that? And if you did that, you did your job, even if you could have reached into the bag of Cheetos bigger, even if you could have stayed still and looked at someone a little longer, even if you could have, you did your job. And so I'm thrilled and so happy all the time. My client, Neen James, was just in Greece, gave a stellar talk. Is she going to come back with the video and we're going to review it and we're going to keep chiseling and working at it? Absolutely. But the talk she gave, the CEO of the company is raving about it. People are coming up to her and saying, never thought of it that way. Can't wait to use this. You did your job. And that makes me happy.
Yeah, there was a speaker that was a mutual friend of this coach, and we were talking about his performance at a conference. Was fantastic. And the speaking coach, I remember, asked me what I thought of it. And I said, well, easily an A plus, won the crowd over. I said, what did you think? And he said, B minus, around there. And I was thinking about it. And he said, well, we wanted him to do more and more and more. And it's hard. It can, I don't know if I was having that same conversation with that speaker and telling them that, then it could get too much in their head. And sometimes there's just a bar that it's always going to get better, but it can be in a great place where everybody's happy as well. And I think that actually helps me transition to this question. From a performance standpoint, how can this help the audience really get more out of you from the speech or keynote or presentation that you're giving? Because there's all about us trying to do more stuff. And then there's really the people in the audience watching and listening and seeing you perform. The true impact, resides with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's the lens that we should always be looking at the choices from is this doing two things? This is what I look at. Is this adding clarity for the audience? So that clarity could be added through your movement, right? One of the number one thing I see, even with very highly paid professional speakers, is really unintentional, unmotivated movement on stage that is distracting. Like, it's like, oh, I want to go over here. I got to go talk to this guy on this side of the room because I haven't been over there in a while. Why? I got to go now. I got to walk to this side of the room and talk to that lady. And I'm not talking about the kind of pacing we see amateurs do where it's like, oh, they're nervous. I'm talking about like professional speakers who just think, well, it's time to go visit the left side of the room now, and now it's time to visit the right side of the room. You see that in like opening acts on a tour, on a like musician tour. You don't see Taylor Swift doing that. You don't see Beyonce doing that. They're very intentional. And I get that there's a different thing that they're doing with the show, but it's not that different. They're still trying to create an emotion and a feeling for the audience. And so how can you think through not what is the right thing to do? When do I visit the left side or the right side, or am I pacing too much? That's the wrong question. The right question is exactly what you just said of the audience watching. Did my movement add clarity? Did I always do the past on this side and the future there? And then when I referred to it, I could point and they could look at it visually and know, oh, he's talking about the past. He's talking about the future. Did I always put my home in one certain section of the stage? And so when I point back to it, I could do that. You've seen me, if you're watching this video, you'll see a couple times I've referenced how we learned as kids to be quiet or to do much. And I always turn my body, I cheat my body away from the camera, and I point backwards behind me. So if I kept doing that throughout this whole thing, you would always know that when I point back there, I'm talking about as kids, what we learned. So is your movement adding clarity? Did your vocal image, the way that you sped up, slowed down, went softer, went louder, went quieter, used your inflection, used your pitch, did that add clarity for the audience? And then the other question throughout all of those is, did we also add contrast? Or was it one note the whole time? Did we stay still in a moment where we were telling a story and we had them leaning in because they thought, wow, he just slowed down. So this must be important, because that's what we do. We slow down when something is important. So he just did that. And then he kind of looked at us and then all of a sudden exploded and moved to get to the next point. That contrast is exciting to the nervous system. It literally keeps them there and alive and awake. So if we're looking at what was the right thing to do on stage, we're looking at the wrong thing. What we should be looking at, just like you said, is from the audience's perspective. Did this add clarity, or did it give them contrast to keep them on the edge of their seat? Everything else I don't care about, including how many times someone says, who cares? Who cares? It just isn't that helpful of a question.
I thought you were just pointing back because you wanted to promote your artwork behind you.
Yeah, I should get an influencer thing for this this artist over here.
Yeah, that's a great point.
25 years ago, Cigar Peg started as a spark, an idea to combine networking with philanthropy. Today, we stand proud as a beacon of inspiration, having raised over $865,000 for charities. Join us as we toast our 25th anniversary. Experience the power of connection, the joy of giving, and the strength of community. Visit us at cigarpeg.com/join.
So a question I want to ask you from a previous guest. This comes from the legendary Harvey McKay. What are the 3 biggest mistakes that you see speakers make?
Oh gosh, I feel like this question Harvey should be answering, because he is the godfather to so many of us. So he should be the one who's addressing this question. But I'll do my best. I think number 1 is way too much teaching content and not enough transformational content. So often when I see even booked and busy speakers coming and they're saying, I'm not getting the spin I want from these gigs. I'm not getting the comments I want. I'm not getting there's something here. When I look at their talk, when we do a video review of their keynote, what almost always is the number 1 place to start is that there's far too much teaching, far too many points, far too much stuff for the audience to do, and not enough space for the audience to say, oh, I'm looking out this window and I need to be looking out this window. Not enough of the reframing, not enough of the aha stuff that guides them to say, oh, I see where I should be going. It's so much teaching. Here are the 7 ways leaders do this, the 9 ways to Instagram, the 5 reasons to do a reel, and not enough of the let's reframe the conversation for you. So way too much teaching is number 1. Number 2, the resolution on their ideas is not dialed in enough. And when I say resolution, I'm really just picking on the camera of, you turn the lens to get the resolution tighter and cleaner. Often the resolution isn't clean. And you'd be so surprised, maybe not, how often really far along in their business speakers come and I just ask really simple questions like, what is it that the audience really wants? Like if we had to put it on the outside of the marquee that would lead them to run into this room, what is it that they really want? People struggle to answer that. Like booked and busy people who wrote books about the topic struggle to answer it from the audience's perspective of they would see it on the marquee and say, that's what I want. What is that? Let's get the resolution tighter. What is your solution to that? I call it the magic elixir. So what is the right way to do that? Meaning, what is the window we should be looking out of in order to get the thing that we want, which I call the I want song. This is a process I teach that's based on like musical theater kind of. And the resolution just isn't clear. And so it leads us to like muddy example, weak stories, the audience kind of leaving the same way. So the resolution not being clear enough. And then the third thing is not realizing they actually can make different choices on stage. It's not that they're making bad choices. It's they're not even aware that there are other choices they could be making vocally, physically, story-wise, word choice-wise, image-wise on the slides. It's not bad choices. It's just realizing it's their lack of knowing they could have made other choices in the first place. Those are the three things.
So what is a question that you would like to ask a future guest on this show?
I'm fascinated by what people are seeing and interested in, what they're excited about, because I think we are the ones who create the future by what excites us and what we pour our energy into. So what I really want to hear the answer to from the next guest or a future guest is, what is the most exciting thing you see in the future in our industry? Whether it's about marketing or about AI or about content or about events or whatever it is, what is the most exciting thing you see coming up? I really am interested in that question.
Fantastic. Well, let's do a quick recap based on Mike's performative advice. Number one, you've worked with a speaking coach in all likelihood, but professional speakers need to know more than just getting over nerves and stage fright. A good actor or actress goes and expands the choices. Think of the tactics and practices when you're at your best. Challenge yourself to be that Oscar-winning performance and how you would specifically tackle any performance or keynote. Number two, think of your keynote as the way you think of directing a speech. Don't just think about performing. Use the lens to how the audience has been transformed by your performance. Number three, don't put too much stuff metaphorically in your bag. Yes, a lot of your performance, your keynotes can be performative, but younger people, as we reference, don't always just add stuff to their storytelling. Be honest with the way you tell a story. Don't always add bad choices to it. And remember, not everyone is interested in everybody's same style. We need your contrast. Great speeches are about clarity and contrast. You still have a range, so make sure you ask what's possible for you. And number four, just throwing this one in, make sure whenever you see Aaron King, offer some Cheetos. Mike, before we exit the stage left or podcast right, any last closing thoughts before we get out of here and go tell some great stories and deliver some great performances?
I think the biggest thing here is, as you think about all these things we talked about today and all the ideas you're learning from all the guests on the show, is to constantly be saying, my ideas, my stories, and my audience's success deserves for me to be making the most thoughtful choices when I'm on stage. And so everything I can do to raise and increase the range of choices available to me is in service of my audience, my message, my story, my voice, and the future.
Agreed completely. Friends, make sure to join us at speakernomics.com and let your voice be heard. Thank you to Leadership Books for sponsoring this episode. I am Kenneth Kinney, your host of the National Speakers Association's podcast, Speakernomics. And this has been another fantastic episode of the show. Thank you, Mike, for lending your mic to NSA, and to everyone listening, thank you for the privilege of your time. And remember, Speakernomics is a podcast where you'll learn to speak, get paid, repeat.
Attention all professional speakers. Are you ready to elevate your career? Join us at Influence 2024, the premier event of the National Speakers Association, happening this August 3rd through the 6th at the Gaylord Rockies Resort in Denver, Colorado. Connect with industry leaders, master your craft, and discover cutting-edge strategies to grow your influence and your speaking business. Now, whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, this event is designed for you. Now, don't miss out on this transformative experience and register now and be a part of something extraordinary. Register at influence24.nsaspeaker.org.